Alright. Hey everyone. I actually just recorded this big elaborate video. I mean, awesome dialogue. I said everything I needed to say. It came out perfectly, and then I checked the camera, and the damn thing wasn't even recording after all. I'm incredibly pissed, nonetheless. But if anything, I like to try to be an optimist at times, and let's just say that was a first. That was a practice. That was a warm up. So let's try again. Part 2. How you guys doing? My name is Mike, and I'm actually here to do a video today about about a question that a lot of people have because of media matters and stuff that have been surfacing. Are people with Asperger syndrome violent, or are people with Asperger syndrome prone to violence? Now, the answer to that, the general answer, the easy answer to that is some of us are, and some of us are not. And that's the simple answer, and that's the general answer. Now, like I said, that's the simple answer, that's the general answer. And the reason I'm even addressing this topic about Asperger's and violence is because a lot of people have the misconception that people with Asperger syndrome and autism are prone to violence. And one of the things they point out is school shootings. Every time you hear about a school shooting happening, there's certain common characteristics that these kids share. Oh, they were on this medication, I guess, and oh, they were this gender or this race, or I don't know. People throw around all kinds of crap. But one of the things that they like to say a lot of times is it's suspected that so and so has Asperger's syndrome. And my guess is that some of the times it maybe is true that they have Asperger's, and maybe other times it's really not. My guess, though, is that they do it to sensationalize. They like to sensationalize everything. But because of that, because it's always suspected that the kid has Asperger's, whether he or she does not, there's this big misconception that people with Asperger's and autism are prone to violence, and that's not necessarily true. You have to understand that one of the main characteristics of children who commit these atrocities, these school shootings, is that, and this is one of the main ones, there are lots of them, but one of the things that all these kids share is that they're bullied and neglected by their peers. They don't fit in. A lot of times they don't have a great support system, either with friends or with family, typically with friends. And because of that, one way or another, that contributes to their violent sprees. That's the best way I can put it. Now, what does it have to do with anything? Well, this goes back to the point. People with Asperger's syndrome are bullied by their peers, neglected by their peers. Depending on their family life, they may or may not have a great support system. That's all up for, But because of that, I guess it's a little, you can kind of stretch and say that because of indirect factors, people with Asperger's syndrome are kind of more likely to commit school shootings. Not because they have Asperger's syndrome, not because Asperger's syndrome makes them violent or makes them do this, but because people with Asperger's syndromes are victims of bullying, neglect, and ridicule. Before I go any further, I just got to make sure this is recording, because I don't want to have to record this damn video a third time because my stupid camera's not working. Let me check. Okay. It's a miracle. It's actually recording this time. What do you know? Anyway, like I was saying, people with Asperger's syndrome, they are very naive a lot of times. We have a certain level of naivety, and because of that, we're a target of bullying. I was bullied and picked on my entire life. I still do get bullied and picked on to an extent at the age of 31, but the thing is that now in my adult life, as the years have gone by, I've kind of developed this, I can't take this shit no more attitude, and because of that, I don't take shit no more, to an extent. I know how to stand up for myself. But, kids in middle school and high school, a lot of them, they don't really have that, especially people with Asperger's syndrome. It's a lot harder for them to stick up for themselves a lot because, they lack social skills, and a lot of times they don't have a good level of self-confidence. What else? This is crazy. The first time I did this video, it just all came out so fluently, and And now, like, I'm like, gee, where was I? What did I say the first video? You know. But anyway, what I'm saying is that whether these kids who commit these school shootings, whether they have Asperger's or not, the fact of the matter is, Asperger's does not make them violent. Asperger's syndrome, autism, it does not cause people to be violent. But indirect consequences of Asperger's syndrome can increase the violence that can lead to violent outbursts and school shootings and this and that. Bullying, being neglected, being rejected by their peers. And like I said, people with Asperger's syndrome, a lot of times, very naive, they're a target for bullying. They're very aloof, they have poor social skills, so people might think they're creepy or weird, you know, and I am pretty fucking weird, I'm not going to admit it, or I'm not going to deny it, rather. And as for, you know, being creepy, that's just because they have poor social skills, not because they're necessarily creeps. Again, just like some people without Asperger's syndromes are creeps, some people with Asperger's are creeps too. But having Asperger's syndrome does not necessarily make you a creep. And speaking of which, I'll probably do a video on Asperger's and creepiness later. There's a whole other subject altogether. But because of all those factors, people with Asperger's syndrome have to deal with all those social consequences. And those social consequences, as far as people can gather, are what contribute to school shootings and violent outbursts. Now, people with Asperger's and autism, people on the autistic spectrum, do have outbursts. They do have meltdowns. Now, what is a meltdown? Typically, a meltdown, and I don't typically have meltdowns, and when I do, they're really not severe. But typically, what a meltdown is a reaction to overstimulation. Not being able to, a sensory overload, not being able to integrate all the sensory input coming in at once. It's not typically someone with Asperger's syndrome going on a rampage and trying to stab and shoot everyone. No, that's not true. And that's not to say that some people with Asperger's and autism don't get violent when they're having a meltdown. I'm sure some of them do. But in my experience, typically they're harmless. And it's not the kid trying to be a brat necessarily. It's not the kid trying to be an asshole necessarily. It's not the kid being violent and going on a shooting spree or killing spree necessarily. It's basically just a reaction to overstimulation, a sensory overload. And it's also important to differentiate between a meltdown and a temper tantrum. When I just said it doesn't necessarily mean they're a spoiled brat. Well, if a kid with Asperger's or autism is throwing a hissy fit, it might not be because he or she isn't getting his or her own way. It might be because too much sensory overload. Like they're going frantic. There's too much, they're in a public place and there's people walking this way, and there's loud noises and there's bright lights and there's this and there's that. I mean that could be it. And it's too much for them and they melt down. And to an onlooker, it might look like the person's having a temper tantrum or throwing being violent and having outbursts, but it's not necessarily the same thing. And I digress. I'm rambling on here, but and like I said, I apologize. The first video I did was perfect, and then the stupid thing wasn't even recording, and I'm so pissed. You got to take my word for it. The first video was so much better. And now I'm having to try to redo it in my head and going, oh gee, what did I say the first time? But this was my video on Asperger's syndrome and violence, from my point of view and from my life experiences anyway. Please feel free to comment, critique, as long as it's done respectfully, please, I beg you. Ask any more questions, and please, if you have any more suggestions, any suggestions at all, of any topics you would like me to cover, please let me know. You see this? See this right here? Talk right into here. Let me know. I'm all ears. Let me know, please. So, that's it. So, bye. What? What are you still doing here? The movie's over. Go. I'm not kidding. Go away. This is the end of the movie.